Good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to introduce this talk, Lives of Marble, from the BIO-SCULT project to the exhibition. My name is Gianfranco Adornato. I'm professor of classical archaeology at the Scuola Normale Superiore here in Pisa. And before introducing our speakers, I would like to stress the commitment of the Scuola Normale Superiore within the EELISA network. As a scientific coordinator of the community archaeology and architecture, we promoted the summer school at the archaeological site of Agrigento at the Temple D in the last month of September-October. We received many applications from different universities and fields of interest and had students and colleagues from E2, from Istanbul, the SNS here in Pisa, UPM, Madrid, and FAU from Erlangen. And from my point of view, the interest testifies the importance of the contamination among competence and skills as requested by the EELISA project between science and humanities as promoted by the community. Furthermore, the talk today exemplifies researches conducted here at the Scuola Normale Superiore within two faculties and a lab between ancient art history and materials sciences. So let me introduce Alessia di Santi. She is a research fellow in classical archaeology at the Scuola Normale Superiore and is currently working on the art historical issues of the collection of Greek and Roman sculptures of the National Archaeological Museum of Florence, now preserved in the Villa Corsini Castello near Florence. Alessia studied at the University of Pisa and received her PhD in classical archaeology from the Scuola in 2019, discussing a dissertation on the images of Antinous, focusing on ancient sculpture. Martina Borroni is a conservation scientist, research fellow in material sciences at the NES laboratory of the Scuola Normale and is currently working on diagnostic analysis of the collection of Greek and Roman sculptures of the National Archaeological Museum of Florence, now preserved in the Villa Corsini, as said before. Martina has a degree in chemical sciences for conservation and restoration at the Ca' Foscari University of Venice, and in her career she has had the opportunity to specialize in digital technologies applied to cultural heritage. So I would like to thank Alessia and Martina for the commitment in the EELISA project, and we have the possibility to hear from them the experience of Le Vite del Marmo from the BIO-SCULT project to the exhibition. Thank you for your attention.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. Before starting, we would like to thank the ELISA European University Network for giving us the important opportunity to share with all the community our research project and some of its results. And we also express a special thanks to all the staff of the Scuola Normale Superiore for the organization of this presentation day. With our talk, we would like to present the project BIO-SCULT, which we are carrying on from September 2020, and one of the most important results of the project, the exhibition that we opened on the last 18th of October at the Scuola Normale Superiore here in Pisa. The BIO-SCULT project is part of the COMAS program, sponsored by the Regione Toscana, with the aim of promoting research in Tuscan museums and archives, disseminating the results using new technologies. BIO-SCULT, supervised by Professor Gianfranco Adornato with the special collaboration of the Laboratorio NEST, involves 2 research fellows, an archaeology with me and my colleague Martina Borroni, who is conservation scientist. It is carrying out thanks to the fundamental collaboration with the National Archaeological Museum of Florence that we would like to thank for its constant support. The aim of the project is to trace out the biography, namely the life stages, or in other words, the lives, of the classical sculptures of the National Archaeological Museum of Florence, currently housed at Villa Corsini in Castello, nearby Florence. It's a very important collection consisting of hundreds of ancient marble works, but unfortunately it's overlooked also by scholars. So let's retrace back together the history of these restless marbles. The origin of this collection of ancient Greek and Roman marbles is due to the archaeologist Luigi Adriano Milani, who was the director of the Regio Museo Archeologico of Florence from the beginning of the 20th century until his death in 1914. In fact, in that period, the Archaeological Museum of Florence was a museum without a collection of ancient marble sculptures from the Greek and Roman world, and the director worked very, very hard to fill this gap. The attempt to get pieces from the Uffizi failed, and for this reason he gathered sculptures from collections that he simply calls Florentine collections, without giving more information, and he says from obscure and hidden places. Because of this, the provenance of the most part of the pieces is unknown. Anyway, Milani collected a lot of pieces that he displayed in the garden of the Archaeological Museum of Florence in order to recall the ancient Roman and the Renaissance gardens, but also because the museum's building didn't have enough space. He displayed the sculptures under the arches that you see on the left and along the garden paths. On the right, you can see the central one. The archaeological garden was inaugurated in 1902 in the presence of Queen Margherita, as shown by this photograph. Here, you can see the space occupied by the archaeological garden still today, and a recent photograph of it. Here instead you have a plan of the same garden in the early 90s with the display of the sculptures made by Milani under the arches of the Palazzo della Crocetta and along the central and the back garden paths. It's very interesting to observe that those arches still exist today. You can see them inside the National Archaeological Museum of Florence and imagine how the ancient sculptures were displayed there. And you could also have the same déjà vu looking at the central garden path and at the back one. Looking at these pictures, I'm sure that you have already guessed that at a certain time the sculptures were moved. At this point, we have to remember that Antonio Minto, who was the director of the Soprintendenza alle Antichità dell'Etruria, namely the local archaeological service, was involved in a new organization of the museum spaces from 1925. In order to gain more covered space for the new topographic section of the museum, Minto closed the arches, as you can see in this plan. Since he observed that the sculptures had suffered a lot during their long outdoor stay, showing evident signs of degradation, he decided to move the sculptures, which were, according to him, the best example of ancient art, in the covered space of the so-called Salone, this big hall of the museum that you see here. In these photographs, you can recognize 3 sculptures which were displayed in the third arch by Milani and then were moved by Minto in the Salone. Regarding the other sculptures, which in the past were placed under the arches, some of them were left in the archaeological garden because, according to Minto, they had a decorative function. All the others were considered waste by Minto and not worthy to be shown to visitors. For this reason, hundreds of sculptures were relegated to the museum's dark storerooms, and from that moment they have been no longer visible. This was the situation lived by the classical sculptors of the Archaeological Museum of Florence when, in the early morning of the 4th of November 1966, the Arno River broke over its banks and flooded Florence, devastating the city and also its archaeological museum. Because of the serious damages caused by the flood, there were no available spaces in the museum for the sculptures. So, in the 80s, they were moved to Villa Corsini in Castello, an elegant late Baroque villa donated to the Italian state in 1968. The villa is nearby Florence, on the slopes of the Florentine Hills, but it's quite far from the city center and the main museum, and also for this it is little known. Anyway, from the 80s, Villa Corsini houses the separated section of ancient sculpture of the National Archaeological Museum of Florence. Some of the spaces of the villa have been restored in order to receive these special guests, so part of the collection is on display. But unfortunately, most of the sculptures are still in the storerooms of the villa, waiting for someone to tell their story. Since September 2020, the BIO-SCULT project has been tracing out the biography of these hidden and silent sculptures. The rediscovery of the ancient marbles in the numerous spaces of the beautiful villa was fantastic and very funny. Thanks to the historical photographs, it is possible to recognize the sculptures that you can see here, and started to study them. Thanks to new interdisciplinary research in which historical artistic investigations and innovative technical scientific analysis have been carried out together, BIO-SCULT finally interrogates the sculptures, analyzing not only their formal and stylistic aspects, but also the material of which they were made up, the marble. The constant dialogue between art and science is our distinctive approach in order to reconstruct the lives of marble. The Lives of Marble, Le Vite del Marmo, is the title of the exhibition that we have the honor and the pleasure to organize with, and thanks to our supervisor, Professor Gianfranco Adornato. It's the most important result of the BIO-SCULT project because the exhibition brings to light sculptures no longer visible. Here I show you for the first time some photographs of the backstage showing the arrival of the sculptures in Pisa. Their arranging, and finally the exhibition ready and open to all the visitors. With someone, we will visit the exhibition soon after this talk, but for those who are not in Pisa today, we would like to briefly present the works on display, starting from Zeus. This is a sculpture made of an head of the 2nd century CE and a more ancient body dated to the 1st century CE. Zeus is the lucky sculpture of the exhibition. In fact, it's the only one with information about the provenance. Thanks to the drawing by the sculptor Pierre-Jacques on the left, we know that in the 16th century the sculpture was part of the important collection by the Lavalle in Rome. It was then moved to Florence by the Medici in the 18th century. The statue of Zeus was placed in the third arch of the archaeological garden, and it is the only one of the 4 pieces of our exhibition to have been displayed in the Salone by Antonio Minto after the closing of the arches, and the sole to have been restored after its arrival at Villa Corsini, where it has been placed in the Salone. The second sculpture is the face of the exhibition. It's a female statue with a body scheme which recalls Aphrodite. Also in this case, the head and the body are from 2 different sculptures, as shown by their technical stylistic differences, even if both were made in the 2nd century CE. We don't know when the head was placed on the body. We see this composition since the early 90s, as we can observe looking at the photograph of the 4th arch. From the same arch comes this naked young man. You can see it here. Now, it's quite incredible that a month ago it was sleeping, we can say, in the storerooms of Villa Corsini. You can recognize him here. The body is a Roman copy, most probably of the 2nd century, of a famous Greek sculpture of the 5th century BC, the Doryphoros by Polykleitos, of which you can see another Roman copy on your right. The sculpture is a difficult case study. The chronology of its head is very challenging, and its antiquity is actually questionable. On the contrary, we have no doubt on the chronology of the arms. Thanks to the information found in the museum guide by Luigi Adriano Milani, we know that the arms were detached because they are modern. And at some point between 1902, when the archaeological garden was inaugurated, and the statue displayed with both arms, as you can see on your left, and 1912, when the guide with the information was published. These arms were found in Villa Corsini storerooms during our research, thanks to these historical photographs. The last sculpture of the exhibition is our first case study, and for this reason we have given special attention to it. As you can see, it represents a couple, a loricated male figure followed by a woman, and it seems a finished sculptural group. We have to say that only the central portion of the bodies is ancient, while the other parts in green here are modern additions. And surprisingly, our sculptural group is actually a relief. It was separated from a sarcophagus of the type showing the lives of a Roman general, like the one in Mantova on the right, at some point of its life, and then completed in order to realize this couple. But actually, it is a fragment of a Roman sarcophagus dated to the 2nd century CE, with modern additions. We can see the complete group made up of the bodies with both the heads in the 10th arch of the archaeological garden. And thanks to the photograph on the right, we know that the general has lost his head and his left arm since 1983. But we found them, and here you can see the moment of the rediscovery of the head. With this video, I conclude my brief presentation of the sculptures with the hope to have stimulated your curiosity. But before giving the floor to Martina, I would like to thank you for your attention with these two beautiful photographs of the students telling the lives of marble.
Good afternoon, everybody. My job, the conservation scientist, is therefore to interrogate an artwork from the point of view of the materials that is made of, and the degradation of which it is subject. This research project was designed to allow direct communication and collaboration between the studies of art and science. So, Alessia and I analyzed the statue of Villa Corsini together, sharing observation, questions, and discoveries. Let's take a closer look at what I did. The sciences and technologies applied to the study of cultural heritage offer a powerful means of understanding its history. Diagnostic for art allows you to investigate through specific instruments the materials of which a work is made and its state of conservation, or rather the degradation to which it is subject. It is possible to identify the chemical elements that make up these materials, understand the chemical physical mechanisms that modify them over time, and finally, which approach to adopt to a possible restoration operation. The study of deterioration before restoration is important for two reasons. Degradations are clues that allow to identify various phases of growth and change of a piece, and their removal without a characterization causes the loss of information that can be very relevant. Secondly, the study of the chemical physical characteristics of a deterioration allows the use of restoration product or techniques more suitable for its removal. The scientific instrument useful for the characterization of the materials with which the artwork are made and for their degradation are numerous and exploit various investigation techniques. For this reason, it is essential to use them in a complementary way to obtain the most complete information possible. To meet the objectives from the BIO-SCULT project, portable non-invasive instruments were used. These are investigative techniques that make it possible to obtain information without affecting the material of which the work is made in any way. The project aims to investigate the history, the biographics of the statues kept in Villa Corsini. To do this, it is necessary to find clues that in our case reside in the state of conservation of the material they are made of, marble. The investigation techniques used are divided into three types: surface imaging techniques, spectroscopic techniques for the chemical characterization of materials, and digital modeling techniques that use physical techniques to obtain information with a digital output. The imaging techniques were portable microscopy, reflected ultraviolet light, and infrared light observed by means of a thermal imaging camera, and allowed us to investigate the type of marble and degradation present on the surface, with as deposits, crust, patinas, erosions. Spectroscopic techniques, portable Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy, FTIR, and Raman spectroscopy, have allowed the characterization of materials used for restoration and some types of deterioration. The digital modeling techniques are 3D scanning and ultrasonic tomography. 3D scanning allows you to obtain a digital copy of the object that can be observed within a virtual space in all directions. In the case of very large objects, such as marble statues, This can be very useful for closely observing, for example, areas that are unreachable heights. Another example is the precise measurement of body parts and the study of their proportions. Ultrasound tomography is a not invasive technique little used in cultural heritage. It allows you to go beyond the surface and analyze the state of aggregation of the marble and its internal structural characteristics through a three-dimensional mapping. The transmission rate of ultrasound is measured from a transmitter probe to a receiver, placed at a known distance. The propagation speed of the ultrasounds varies according to the characteristics of the object under investigation, allowing to identify inhomogeneities within the material, linked to the variation of its mechanical properties. Now let's see how this instrumentation has helped us understand the life of the 4 sculptures that we have exposed in this exhibition. The statue despising Zeus is the only piece on display that have been recently restored. It is in fact normally exhibited in the hall of Villa Corsini. The restoration intervention, from the point of view of the study of the deterioration, has removed some information that could have told part of this history of the sculpture. Despite this, it was still possible to find many clues about the environments in which the statue lived and the events it went through. Its state of conservation is good. The marble is stable, despite the fact that over time it has suffered losses of material, both superficial erosion and complete detachments, and has been integrated several times. In fact, numerous integrations are visible throughout the body, made with different types of marble, most likely in different periods. We see them highlighted in green in this degradation mapping. The analysis of the surface under the microscope has made it possible to compare the types of marble used for the creation of the statue and its additions. The body was made with a medium-grained marble, grain size from 0.1 to 0.9 millimeters, while the modern addition, different types of marble were used, both with medium and fine grains. The head, not pertinent, is made with medium-grained marble, similar to that used for the body. The microscope also made it possible to observe the types of degradation, such as surface erosion, chromatic alteration, fracturing. In this slide, we can observe the images showing different angles of the ultrasound tomography. The colors we see correspond to the speeds with which the ultrasound has passed through the material. The color scale starts from the blue, which represents low speeds, and ends at red, which represent high speeds. The speed that a non-degraded marble should have correspond roughly to the orange color. You can therefore see how the whole statue has undergone awakening. In particular, I highlighted a cross-section of the thigh area. The left thigh is blue, while the right is green. This indicates that the left thigh is weaker than the right. It is a particular area. The left leg with the eagle and the trunk support the weight of the upper part of the statue. The section of the tomography that we are observing is the thinnest and therefore most delicate part of the structure, which has in fact undergone several restorations over time. This sculpture, the female one, is unrestored and in a particular state of conservation, covered by a deposit of dust. There are black crusts and widespread erosion. The head is characterized by a fracture due to the loss of the back. Its front part is supported by a large rusty metal pin that joins it to the torso. The rust, carried by the water, has created a conspicuous stain on the chest. The torso has numerous fractures, one of which completely separates the right side from the rest of the body. However, the restoration looks solid. The missing right thigh was replaced with a square brick and mortar base to allow for vertical support for the sculpture. Microscopic analysis has allowed us to observe the characteristics of the marble. The head is made with a medium fine grain marble, grain size from 0.1 to 0.25 millimeters, while the torso with a coarse grain one, grains between 0.2 and 0.8 millimeters. Therefore, the analysis of the marbles confirmed that the head and the torso are not pertinent. It was also possible to observe the microscopic appearance of the degradations present on the surface. The rust of the pin has penetrated into the pores present between the underlying marble grains. Observing the black crust on the face, it can be seen that it is composed of a more superficial layer of black carbonaceous particles which have been incorporated into the underlying layers composed of gypsum and deriving from the action of acid rain which has dissolved the marble and reacted with it. The black crust are therefore another type of degradation due to exposure in an outdoor environment, and we find them widespread in various parts of the work. The most obvious is the one found on the right cheek. Black crust form in areas sheltered from direct rain washout. In this case, in fact, the head is tilted forward, and the cheek is in a protected position. This degradation derives from a process of sulfation of the calcium carbonate due to the presence of sulfates in the atmosphere. The chemical reaction leads to the transformation of the calcium carbonate of the marble into hydrated calcium sulfate, which is nothing but gypsum. The outermost part of the black crust is dark in color, as it incorporates carbonaceous particles present in the atmosphere. Therefore, the crust is dark and compact on the outside, white and fragile in the lower layer in contact with the marble. Thanks to the illumination with an ultraviolet lamp, it was possible to highlight the chalky nature of the crust. The fluorescence of the gypsum in the visible spectrum tends towards green. The mill statue is in a precarious state of conservation, covered by a consistent layer of dust deposits. In particular, the marble of the head tends to disintegrate with little stress. It is in fact characterized by a strong superficial erosion. The body has black crust and rust spots due to the metal pins. The head and the legs are still firmly attached to the body in the fractured areas. Microscopic analysis made it possible to observe and compare the types of white marble used. In this case, a coarse grain marble, grain size from 0.4 and 1.7 millimeters, was found for the head, body, and left thigh. Instead, medium fine grain size from 0.2 to 0.5 millimeters, is observed from the lower leg, below the knee, right leg, and arm fragments. The 3D scan of the work has provided a very detailed view of the surface state of conservation of the marble. The surface of the head does not appear smooth but rough. It is the result of erosion due to multiple agents of degradation, including atmospheric agents, to which the materials was subject during its stay in the museum garden. The erosion of the head is visibly more marked than that of the shoulder and chest. This indicates that the agent of degradation had a different reaction on these two parts and suggests that they are two different types of marble, although apparently very similar. The sculptural group is unrestored, with the surface covered with deposit of dust. There are black crust and widespread erosion. It was numerous integrated part. The lower part from the knees to the entire support base, the right arm and the head of the female figure, the left shoulder of the male figure. The missing parts of the left arm and the head of the male figure, found in the deposits of Villa Corsini. The right arm and the head of the female figure, as well as the left shoulder of the male figure, are housed, albeit in a precarious condition. Another structural analysis method used by BIO-SCULT is thermography. The analysis of a manufactured article with a thermal imaging camera following heating, a few degrees, therefore without any consequences for the studied object, provides information on the thermal and therefore structural properties of the constituent materials. It is evident for the image that the marble portion relating to the integration have a different behavior compared to that used for the bodies, indicating the bad thermocoupling characteristics of the integrations. Observing the back of the work has allowed us to understand a fundamental part of its history. Here, in fact, it is possible to observe a completely flat surface, and in correspondence with the left shoulder of the male character, the mark left by a working tool can be seen. It is a blade used with an abrasive. This operation was used to remove the two figures from the front of a sarcophagus, as Alessia told you earlier. Here are some of the lives of these statues have lived in the methodology, and the methodology with which Alessia and I have, at least in part, brought them to light. In the hope you have intrigued and stimulated you, we invite you to see our protagonist live at the Torre del Conte Ugolino. Thank you for your attention and good evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alessia. Thank you, Martina, for this brilliant presentation with important results due to the investigation conducted here at the Scuola. This very interesting methodology between humanities, classical studies, and material sciences. I would like to invite attendees to ask questions if you are interested. Otherwise, we have time for 1-2 questions also from the audience here at the Scuola. And perhaps I can start with the first one. Since you have now so many information regarding the art historical, archival records, and the scientific analysis, how do you imagine to collect all this data and how to use them? I'm thinking about the external audience or not scientists, but just curious people interested in ancient sculptures. Are those data at some point free to be accessed, or are you still thinking to create a new database in order to to have a platform, let's say, with all this information from both sides.
Thank you very much for your question. And yes, as a first step of our research, we have prepared a huge database with all the data collected. But this database is now, at this moment, closed. Is very useful because is for the museum, the Archaeological Museum of Florence, but from this database we have to think to another one more open to all the public, and for this specific point I think that Martina could say something about the new spin-off in Next Art.
Yes, in this moment we are creating a new spin-off, a new startup, where we can collect and we can create a new and modern database with both the scientific and historical artistic information, but in a virtual space, in a digital space, where the 3D models of the sculpture can speak in some way directly with the public. We would to offer this information both to the public and also for the researcher in a more specific way. So
Thank you very much. This is also another interesting point, a second level, second step in this very interesting research. Other questions? Yes, another question. Come here.
Thank you very much, and congratulations for this, not only for this presentation that was very, very inspiring, but also for this project. I think the approach you are carrying out is quite unique, I think, and it's very great to see this historical artistic side going hand in hand with the scientific approach. So if I may, I would have a question about scientific analysis. I was wondering about future developments of scientific analysis that you are thinking to apply in the future of this project, and for the future of this project, and if there is any relationship also with the damages or specific state of condition of the statues. So there will be other scientific analysis are you thinking to apply in this project? Thank you.
thank you for the question. Now we try to develop and improve the ultrasonic tomography because we think that it's a very interesting way to understand an object, because the way you can understand the structural situation inside the material, it's important for the state of conservation and for future operation of restoration, for example. So this type of analysis, I think, is the focus for the future. And yeah, the degradation, the deterioration is the way to follow for choose the right type of analysis. So we have to study much more statue of Villa Corsini, and I think in each case we will understand what kind of type of analysis is more is the best for the specific situation of the statue.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Otherwise, we thank again Alessia and Martina for their presentation. I would like to thank also the National Archaeological Museum and the director Mario Iozzo for the opportunity to work on the collection of the statues. And as I said at the beginning of this talk, the Scuola Normale Superiore and the Faculty of Humanities is in the front for the EELISA network, and I think that this project has exemplified our commitment to the network, to the EELISA project, and also to the future of a new discipline looking back and forth from the humanities to the sciences. So thank you for your attention, and we hope to have you visiting the exhibition Le Vite del Marmo in our location at the Palazzo dell'Orologio in Piazza dei Cavalieri in Pisa. So thank you very much. Have a good evening. Thank you.